Welcome back to our panel on Libya. Well, a lot is going on in Libya in terms of democratic process. We are expecting an election on 24th of December. And like many countries experience, there's an escalation in terms of internal political competition. On the other hand, there are some aspects of Libyan political process that is sui generis, because Libya is experiencing a full-scale free democratic election after many decades, and it will be a type of experience for the future. So in this panel, I will be joined by distinguished guests. First, I would like to present them. The first speaker is His Excellency Mahmoud Ahmed Alftise. He is the former Minister of Industry of Libya. Second speaker is a very well-known Italian expert, Mrs. Claudia Gazzini, Senior Analyst at International Crisis Group. Welcome. And third, we have Anas El Gomati, again, a very well-known Libyan expert, and he is the Director General of Sadeq Institute. And finally, we have Ousama Assed. He is the CEO of Libya Center for Strategic and Future Studies. I would like to welcome you all to this panel, and I believe that it will be an occasion that most will benefit from your knowledge base, because you are the well-known Libyan experts on the globe. So with the visual thinking of having this panel be fruitful, first I would like to summarize what's going on the ground with just clear and several sentences. Later then I will pass questions to you. Well, we had Paris conference. Well, there were debates about its effectiveness because of the Berlin conference and the second Berlin conference, and later then some meetings of the statesmen. But we have it, and at the end of the day, there is a great commitment to support the elections in Libya. On the other hand, there is another thing to be discussed, because some claim in Libya that Libya is still lacking technical adequacy, just because of the technical problems. On the other hand, for instance, His Excellency Khalid Mishri suggested that the elections should be handled on February 15th. On the other hand, a great international pressure, presses Libyans to realize these elections. Well, another issue, there are debates in Libya if this election law is valid or not. And secondly, if the outcomes of the elections will be accepted or not. Because still we have Haftar with a full military capacity. And once he loses, and now there's a problem with his candidacy, well, there is some type of a probability that an escalation will be in the agenda. So we are just in the mid, a political process with a potential, effect of a military escalation. And on the other hand, we don't know what will happen right after elections, because once any party does not recognize the outcome of the elections, well, it's again another excuse for an escalation. Or we don't know what will happen exactly on the day, December 24th. So, right in the light of this overall mood in Libya, I would like to first His Excellency Mahmoud Ahmed Alftise. Now, what is next, and what do you expect, and what is existing? Or let me just reverse the question. What is existing? What do you expect on December 24th? And what is next? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Professor. And I also welcome our colleagues in this panel. What I would like to say is we are only about 25 days from decided date to hold the elections, and we still have a conflict between the political powers about the date, which is put this date in jeopardy and might not see the election on the 24th of December. The reason is that HOR, House of Representatives, if I can say, or maybe I can say the president of the of HOR, Mr. Aguila Salah, issued a law, which is exactly a false law, for the presidential and House of Representatives law concerning this to be held in 24th of December. Unfortunately, the HOR did not approve of this law, and Mr. Aguila and his group issued this law according to their wishes and designed to exactly serve their purpose, either to be in the power or not to be, maybe only to see that it will not be held at all, because they would like to stay in power. Even this laws was not really appreciated by local and international committee, even though some of the regional and probably some of the countries pushing for 4th of December, regardless of this kind of what we call false laws that exactly nobody approve of. Anyway, UNSMEL issued some statements according to what happened, and tried to tell the House of Representatives to cooperate with the High State Council in order to have a law that everybody is exactly probably approved, so we can see fair election in 24th of December. But unfortunately, Mr. Aguila and his group refused to listen to the international and also to the local political powers. So I think we are exactly we can not see for sure that 24th of December we will have an election. And I think day by day, we are losing the hope. Probably this week, by the end of this week or probably next week, we will see that maybe there will be some delays, maybe 3 months, 6 months. But the thing is, what is the consequences based on this? Because there are some political powers now are waiting for this occasion in order to either to disapprove of the whole roadmap, and maybe we'll go to some other chaos again, because some factions either in the east, also some of it in the west of Libya, are putting their own aims that 24th December is the election, and they are ready for taking this election, especially some people who are exactly like Mr. Bashaga and his group. They are really fighting for 24th of December in order to have a new government. And now, as you say, as you can see, the actions now in the presidential council, in the presidential election, there were about 98 nominee, and now the election institution already dropped about 25 of them, and also now there are some in the court, and I'm sure you heard about what happened to save Islam Gaddafi, and the debate about the debate about being as a person to run for election, and he's already wanted by the court, the International Court of Criminals, and also he has been put in jail for some time, and also there is some kind of what we call judicial decrees in his behalf to be by the Libyan courts. And also there are a lot of debates about what's going on now, what's going on in Sabha, as a matter of fact, for the 3 days, and Haftar is trying to not let the judges to be in the court to decide in the fate of Mr. Saif al-Gaddafi. So the things are really getting into chaos these days, and I think we will. I don't think so. We will see 24 as a December as a target date for election. But the thing is now, what happened after 24? Are we going to have? Are we going to continue with this national government, or we will have a new government? And the debate is really getting very hot these days. So I think what is the question is who is exactly the obstacle of the elections? Is the HOR, Aguila and his group, and Haftar, even though those who are really now making this all these problems, but they are not being even mentioned by the international community, and they say that maybe the High State Council is the one who is anti-elections, but this is not true. I think Haftar and his group and Aguila and his group are really being the main obstacles to have a fair and good elections to Libya. Sorry. So I think this is exactly the summary of what I would like to say. I really prepared my text in Arabic, and unfortunately, not having a translation, I think I just want to summarize what I have written. And thank you very much. Maybe I will, if there's any questions, I will answer. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you. What I have concluded is that there will be elections on December 24th, but, well, the reasonable thing is to have it maybe with a delay. And there are some threats to the proceeding of the elections, like we have currently witnessing in SETA province. Let me just remind one thing to audience. This election will bring something important to you Libyans. It's legitimacy. Because legitimacy is something very important, mainly in the post-conflict regions. Once you have this privilege with a proper way, then you have the luxury to go forward in accordance with the policy you preferred. So this election is somehow an opportunity, and in the meantime, a risk. Once interrupted by, foreign actors or, internal military actors, then the legitimacy will somehow will not be, recognized in Libya, and that's another danger. So I would like to pass to Claudia, because in accordance with the perception of legitimacy and recognition, EU played its role maybe in 2014 and 15, because EU said it's the Tripoli government of national accord as the legitimate one. And right after the attack of Haftar, there was a type of, hesitation in European mind. And today, EU is pressing a lot for elections, just to facilitate a political process, and Libyans deserve it. So, and by the way, there's another thing that should be emphasized. There's an Italian and French agreement, for further cooperation, and Libya, what I believe, is included to this agreement. So if you just take the internal developments, external actors, the stance of EU, France and Italy, it's a long question. I'm well aware of it. How do you take it? I mean, how do you see the proceeding and the post-election period? For instance, do you expect a military escalation right at the very same day of the election or right after the election? Thank you. Here you are. By the way, I did something. Just let me remind to all audience, speaking to only yourself on screen is a bit hard. So I will stay in here on the screen so we can chat. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move you close to my camera. So I have the impression of talking to you, Murat, at least. Thank you very much. And, you mentioned, Murat, the fact that in 2015, there was international recognition towards the Tripoli government. And this recognition then sort of seemed to sort of waver when there was the attack of Haftar. I would like to take a step back and go back to 2014, because when we're talking about elections in Libya, and we agree that these elections that are coming up are high stake and high risk, we have to go back to the last elections that Libya has held to understand what were the pitfalls then and what are the risks today. Libya had its last elections in 2014. They were parliamentary elections, so relatively less high stake than now. Now we're talking about presidential elections. We're talking about a vote to give very strong powers to a new popularly elected president. In 2014, it was the second parliamentary elections that Libya held. There was no contestation of the vote. The vote happened rather smoothly. There was no violence on voting day. But what happened afterwards. There was a failure to hold a handover ceremony. The members of the new elected parliament decided to convene in Tobruk, whereas the roadmap at the time had established it was Benghazi supposed to be the seat of the parliament. And most importantly, there was a group of boycotting members of the new parliament. And a legal case was presented to the Supreme Court, to the constitutional chamber of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that the elections were invalidated because of technical flaws in the way the election law that was written and passed in February 2014 was passed. So flaws in the way the law was passed. And what followed is what we know: a divided Libya with two rival assemblies, a newly elected parliament in Tobruk and the General National Congress that stayed in power in Tripoli and considered itself still the legitimate parliament. Two governments, respectively allied to the two parliaments, two military coalitions, divisions in the financial institutions of the country. Now, these problems have, lingered and have undermined Libya's stability for the following 6 years. Okay, we have a unity government now, but these military divisions, financial divisions, and so on are still harming us to date. Now, when we look at today's elections, I would say there are many risks in many different fields, and the speaker before me also mentioned some of them. But I would place high up this risk of undermining the whole election process because of a judicial sort of ruling in the future over the laws and the legal basis for these elections. That's what happened in 2014. And if there is, and that is what could happen today if there's no political goodwill. If there's goodwill and there's an agreement between the parties, we don't get into these legal complications and these legal disputes. But in Libya, when there is no political will, law can be weaponized. This is what we know. over these past few years. Now, what are the issues with this law? As a speaker before me mentioned, there's a procedural problem with the election laws, right? We know they were passed by the House of Representatives without holding a vote. They were signed in. This is a way the HOR has to pass laws, and it's been doing that for a long time. But this procedure of passing a vote has, raises a lot of question marks. Is this legally valid or not valid? According to members of the HOR, it is, because they have this process of opening a session. And in this case, these laws that were passed in September and October 2021 are based on a session that was opened in 2018. So a session to discuss election laws, and then were validated in a discussion at the HOR. So there's this procedural problem of how the laws were passed. But there, I would also underscore a few substantial problems, and I'll be brief. One, and I'm just flagging the most important things that are relevant if we go towards a scenario where people try to invalidate the elections using the same tactics of 2014. The substantial problem is the sequencing that has been proposed. As you know, the law for the election, what we have is parliamentary elections and presidential elections. The sequencing that has been proposed is, first we have a first round of the presidential elections, and then we have a second round of the presidential elections combined with parliamentary elections. This is what has been announced by the head of the Libyan High Electoral Commission. The law, however, doesn't state that. The law, as we have it today, Law number 2 about the parliamentary election says that the date for the parliamentary election shall be decided 30 days after the conclusion of the presidential elections. Okay, which is clear. Anybody that reads this in Arabic understands that we have to conclude the presidential elections, and then 30 days after that, we have parliamentary elections. But the head of the Electoral Commission says, oh, it's okay, we're going to do a different sequencing. We're going to have parliamentary elections on the same day as the second round of the presidential election. And some HOR members say, yes, we've approved this as well. But as far as I'm concerned, these are all verbal agreements. This sequencing is not backed in the text of the law. So if we're really going to go for this type of sequencing that sees a second round together with a parliamentary, we need to amend the law, because otherwise somebody's going to come up in the future and say, hey, you did a sequencing of the election that is not even envisaged in the law. And aren't that not grounds to invalidate these elections? So if we want to go forward with this sequencing, then we need to change the word of the law, the text of the law. I would say a better sequencing is possible because at the moment, the sequencing proposed sees an empty gap of 52 days at the very least between the first round of the presidential elections and the second round of the presidential elections. The argument being we need 30 days because the law says 30 days need to pass. We need 12 days for appeals and 10 days to publish the results. But this is a huge amount of time. I would say, given the current circumstances, what is important is let's review the law, ensure that it's airtight, that it cannot be used in a future Supreme Court constitutional chamber, which, by the way, currently is closed. And the only reason why we can go forward with these elections on the basis of these laws is because the constitutional chamber of the Supreme Court is closed, because had it been open, this law probably would have been debunked, right? But if we want to go forward with elections, at the very least, let's review the text of the law in order for it to be airtight to appeals that can always happen after the elections take place. Let's consider a different sequencing whereby we do a technical delay of the elections, but we put parliamentary and the first round of the presidentials together, which would allow for a shorter gap in time between first round and second round of the parliamentary elections. I think these are important things to bear in mind in order to avoid pitfalls over this whole electoral process going forward. Thank you very much.
This is very interesting because when you talk, I just feel that I'm hearing His Excellency Khalid Mishri, because he told the same things in panels, workshops, and technical deficiencies of the current electoral law. And other than this, there's also a problem in terms of what type of a political system will be implemented, because there's no constitution yet. So, well, you can vote for the parliament, but no constitution. So the institutions, for instance, must be fixed, and they may have somehow an effect on the procedure of the elections. So it's another issue. If you want, let me give you another word in the other session, and you can just, review that. On the other hand, I totally agree with you. Reviewing the current electoral law is really important because now it gives an excuse to the local actors to perceive this election as illegitimate and be more dominant in the areas that they are in charge with. And that's another de facto division. I mean, the ultimate purpose of this election is to keep the Libya united in terms of politics, in terms of integrity, and it's a risk. So your term technical delay is actually the one that I would prefer and emphasize most in the coming days. So thank you for inspiring me. So let me go to Mr. Anas El Gomati, Director General of Sadeq Institute. Well, we have two speakers actually confirming each other that there are deficiencies and risks on the ground, and the current internal political developments are really escalating with a frequency that we can't imagine, and we don't know what will happen tomorrow. So how do you take the current proceeding and also your expectation, and how do you read the statement of Claudia, because I know that you have some further ideas on this. Please go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aslan, and also to SETA Brussels for hosting us today for this timely discussion. I think I'll start my comments by saying one of the striking features of this discussion is the overemphasis and the focus on the elections, whilst forgetting the intended outcome, what are elections supposed to produce, and then secondly, the state building process. We've entirely forgotten, what happened over the last 2 years since Berlin won, and the discussions that took place in January 2020. The vision, the roadmap. I think it has been resequenced. I mean, I think Berlin was quite clear. There was supposed to be a ceasefire. That agreement, was done in principle and then later agreed in October 2020. There was supposed to be a plan to unify the rival factions under a single state and then move to elections. And I think we've resequenced that to just see this entire chapter as about elections. And I think it kind of paints the picture that everything is quite rosy in Libya when it's far from that. I mean, we have to ask ourselves, what is, as you've asked, what is the situation on the ground? It's uncertainty and instability. It's actually like watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. There are security actors on the ground today that are challenging everything from the legal proceedings, as our speakers have already mentioned, the judges sitting in Sabha, who are supposed to receive an appeal by Saif al-Islam and Gaddafi, were attacked. The court was attacked, and the sitting judges were attacked by an armed group that is loyal to Khalifa Haftar. In the same 24 hours, a presidential candidate, Ismail al-Shtawi, who was on a visit to the eastern city of Derna, was also attacked by forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar. So I'm not sure what we're preparing or what we're waiting for, but as far as I can see today, there's an enormous cost that Libyans are paying for a process that we see is demanded, and also the results of which, because this is always where statements by internationals, by the UN mission, by many of the international actors keep saying the results must be respected. Well, that's a perfectly good analogy, only if the process is respected by the actors participating. I don't think that the question, when we look at the legal framing of this, I think when we examine the broader legal framework, I think there is, this aspect that Claudia touched on, that the judiciary isn't working right now, the constitutional chamber of the Supreme Court isn't working right now. Well, that's a perfectly good analogy for a vending machine, or it's a good analogy for a restaurant. It's not working right now, but not for a state that is experiencing major political divisions and crises that need to be resolved and mediated. And I should add that the UN chief envoy, Jan Kubiš, has resigned from his position over the last week. So Libya does have no mediator at a political level or an international level, but it also has no court, no rule of law to be able to determine what is a resolution to this crisis. And it's selective. It can sit to receive appeals, but it can't sit to decide whether or not the elections law is legal. And it brings me back to the broader question about the constitution. I mean, what we're seeing unfold today, and that's why I'm asking about what are elections supposed to produce? Well, we can see that there is antagonism on all three sides right now. And when I mean three sides, I also mean that in terms of the political divisions. I also mean that in terms of the geographic divisions. The center of gravity today for Saif al-Islam is Sabha in the Fezzan region, southern Libya. The center of gravity today for Khalifa Haftar is in eastern Libya, in Benghazi or Rajma. The center of gravity today for Abdelhamid Dbeiba, or for those that opposed Khalifa Haftar and also opposed Saif al-Islam Gaddafi and his regime in 2011, is Tripolitania in western Libya. Those three centers of gravity have not only political divisions and geographic divisions, but there is military buildup internally and between those three regions. And we're seeing that in the build-up to elections. That can't be, as I've said, it's like watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. It can't be an indicator of stability. It can't necessarily be an indicator that the results are going to be respected. And I think that's a result of not only the absence of the legal fine-tuning when it comes to this law that was promulgated, that was issued by decree. Some joke that it was issued by fax. There has to be due process. There has to be a parliamentary vote on these issues, because that law, we should be quite clear, it was designed and tailored to fit one single candidate, Khalifa Haftar. And I think that in itself is not only, it's not bridging the divides, it's creating more and less consensus and creating more instability. And I think having a final result and resolution on that question is important. And unfortunately today, the only way of having a final resolution on that question is by consulting the constitutional chamber of the Supreme Court. It's not just nitpicking about small issues here. This is a determination about Libya's political future. And I should add the constitutional basis. When we think about the intended outcome, we've already talked about the military level and about how this is drawing further instability. But let's just ask ourselves a basic question. What are we electing? What kind of power will this next head of state hold? We have no idea. There is absolutely no restraint on the next future president. And I think that's dangerous in a country with a legacy and tradition for strongmen. And certainly in the case of individuals like Khalifa Haftar and Saif al-Islam, who today people bizarrely characterize as pro-democratic, when their histories can be summarized as quite the opposite. They've had coups and attempted coups. And in fact, Claudia's timeline, I think, of the events in 2014 missed one single component. Yes, there were elections on the 25th of June, but there was a civil war that erupted on May 15th. And that civil war was taking place during the elections. And we've seen as a result the kind of polarization on the ground. It was not just a political difference or a boycotting by certain members. There was a massive rupture and a cardiac arrest to the country. There was an individual, Salwa Boughagis, who was murdered or presumed murdered on the day of elections. We've seen this film before, and I think we should be very cautious about moving towards elections when we've seen presidential candidates being assaulted, we've seen the court being assaulted and attacked, we've seen a buildup of military moves. I think the real question that we should be considering today is not if violence breaks out, but when violence breaks out. What are we going to do when violence breaks out? And I think that's a really deep question that we need to be asking ourselves, because it goes back to the fundamentals of Berlin. And I think we've lost sight of what the initial vision for Libya was. As I said, the picture is not rosy, and elections are not going to be an antidote to this crisis, to this illness that Libya is facing. In fact, the antidote as elections could be more lethal. In fact, it could actually be the poison. And I think what we have to go back to is understanding that there is a vision to unify the state. If you have rival factions on the ground and they are unwilling to unify, then there is a deeper malaise, a deeper problem. That also includes members of the international community that are holding that military file quite tightly to themselves and are sequencing the elections in a way that gives one candidate in particular, Khalifa Haftar, a luxury of choices. I can run for the president, and if I win, great, I'm the head of state. But if I lose, let's go back to Berlin. Let's go back to negotiating where I stand as the head of a military faction, the Libyan Arab Armed Forces, and that's going to plague the next state. I don't think we're going to move towards elections and see a fresh slate or a reset. Libya needs that hard reset. It needs a hard reset of those institutions so that when we do have elections that are peaceful, hopefully, that we have an outcome that is both peaceful, stable, but also democratic. You need to have a subservient state. You need to have a subservient military. Today, whatever the outcome, we're going to have a president that presides over a divided state. You'll have a president that has untold powers in terms of what they can do, their relationship to the parliament, their relationship to the Libyan people, their relationship to the rival military factions. But you'll also have rival military factions on all sides now, renegotiating their relationship with the next president. That's not going to solve Libya's problems. So we have a checklist of problems that are going to emerge after the elections. And I think, as I've said, it is like watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. But I think the alarm bell should start ringing. And I also agree that there should be a plan. You know, the preparation for these elections, there's been better preparation to catch a bus. It's not like you can say, well, I'll just get the next one and 6 minutes later on. You can't have elections that way. And Libyans that are trying to choose their political destiny and their future and the character of their state, whether it be democratic or military in nature, should be given a bit more dignity and a bit more time to choose those things. So as other speakers have said, and in the last session it was made quite clear, there should be a roadmap, but that roadmap should include a number of things. First and foremost, there needs to be a question about the way that the rival military factions on the ground are building up to a new conflict, and that needs to be put to bed. That's the first question. The second question are the legal disputes. That's starting at this election law that was passed by fax or passed by decree or whatever we want to call it, but it also has to end at the broader vision, legally speaking, of what this president holds in terms of power and what the constitutional basis for these elections and the future state is. And finally, a political resolution to determine which of the candidates can stand and which can't, because we should be quite clear, and I'll end it on this note. If you have those three camps today, the pro-Gaddafi camp, the pro-Haftar camp, and the pro- or anti-Haftar, anti-Saif al-Islam, pro-revolution camp, if you have those three camps, it looks like a Mexican standoff. There can only be one winner. There's going to be two other losers. And I don't believe that you can just ask them to respect the results if the process was not respected from its inception. We need to do more than that, and we have to do a bit of soul searching and some planning and programming for what comes next, because I see a conflict on the horizon, but I see no solutions out of it. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you. Very clear words, very clear words. So still, the question goes if the post-election period will recognize the coming president and the parliament as legitimate or not. That's a big question mark. And what we have experienced in 2014 and 15, well, it may repeat itself, you said, and it's really important because still we have 25 days for the elections, so there must be something done on the ground to prevent, provocations, agitations, and in the meantime, elections must be smooth. On the other hand, if you compare this wishful thinking with Claudia, that means it's technical problem to proceed this in the way as it ought to be. Well, we will have problems. Thank you so much, Anas. And now let me go to our fourth speaker, Mr. Ousama Assed. He is the CEO of Libya Center for Strategic and Future Studies. We had been together in many occasions in workshops, for instance, and thanks again for coming up. I would like to ask the same question just to make sure that we can confirm the previous three speakers or not, because I saw a type of pessimism in terms of the proceeding of these elections because of the technical difficulties, incursions, probable escalations, and also the post-election period. Do you agree with them, or do you have a further, prospect for this? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Aslan. Thank you, Dr. Aslan. Good morning, everyone. Well, I think I'm pessimistic about the elections for different reasons. Well, I was in Tripoli and the past days, and I met some of the candidates, and I witnessed the exercise of people putting forward their candidacy. One of the things that is alarming for me is the huge number of candidates. We have 98 candidates. So if we consider that 10 of these candidates are the serious contenders, we have 88 candidates that are, I would say, not very serious ones. And some of them are taking presidency elections as a way to bargain their future. So it shows that, first of all, the election process was not well prepared. It was ill-prepared. And it shows that the function of the president of the state is not really clearly defined to the people. And so everyone thinks that he has the right to run. And I think this is very, very dangerous. And it shows not only that, as Anna said, we are fragmented militarily and regionally, but Libya is fragmented as a population, and that is very, very serious. So I don't see how people will accept the results. That's very difficult for me. The other thing is on the ground. I'm talking about Tripoli. Now, the military factions or the military groups in Tripoli are reconsidering their positions and rebuilding their alliances. And according to what they would expect the outcome of the elections. And the other thing that is very disturbing is that within the group that is, I would say, pro-revolutionary and anti-Haftar, anti-Saif al-Islam, it's very fragmented, and they're working against each other, and they're trying to exclude each other through the legal process. So I'm afraid, and this is something that Libya has been going through, is that everyone is talking about superficially about resolving Libya. Everyone Libya's problem. Elections shouldn't be a target. It's a means to achieve something further, something stronger, something deeper, to build a nation, a democracy, a civilian rule, and so on. When talking to the candidates, I was very alarmed that none of the candidates had an action plan. Their only aim is to become president, and that's all. Because knowing that the president or the next president will have extreme powers. This is very alarming. And the other thing that is very, very alarming, everyone is ready to compromise on power, to compromise on principles. I think it's for the benefit of the Libyan people that elections should be delayed on a technical basis to allow to prepare the atmosphere, the general atmosphere better, to allow for a dialogue to have a common ground. And it is better that we have a kind of dialogue between the candidates or their teams to at least have a common ground on the security aspect, the economic aspect, the national reconciliation, and then go for elections. How I see it, it's not if Haftar wins, the West will contest, the South will contest. If Saif al-Islam wins, the same thing would happen. If someone from the West will win, Haftar, Saif al-Islam will contest, but even people in the West will contest. And the other alarming thing is now we have 3 different regions. The East is an independent region. The South, to Sirt, is becoming a region supportive of Saif al-Islam. And the West is a region with many leaders. And I think this will continue whoever the president is. According to me, how I see it, the new president will be a weak president. He will be opposed by everyone. The armed groups will rebuild their alliances, and their mindset is that whoever becomes president, he will need to work with us, and he cannot do without us. And the other alarming thing is that no one is talking about the real issue, Haftar, the LNA, and the danger and how much it threatens Libya's stability. And it's as long as the LNA and Haftar is treated as this way, he is president at least of Eastern Libya. So I think the international community is always looking for a simple solution, a superficial solution, pushing Libyans towards solutions that they can sell at home, but forgetting the need that we need a dialogue and a sincere dialogue. There has never been a dialogue. So because the absence of this dialogue, because the absence of a common ground, we're looking into details, legal details, I don't know what, and trying to create problems. I think the situation is very, very dangerous. It's very, very pessimistic. And I think whatever the outcome, whoever wins the elections, Libya will, I think, fall in a very, very severe and acute crisis. I think more dangerous and more severe than the previous crisis Libya lived in. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Then you confirmed the previous three speakers with your pessimism. On the other hand, one thing should be delineated in here. It's really important and challenging. If elections are perceived not as an asset, but an ultimate goal, and if neither of the presidential candidates, does have a program, a political program, to be presented to the public. So it's again not a technical fault of the law, election law, but also a type of lacking preparation for the elections in a proper way that a democratic country requires. On the other hand, you are right, and I totally agree with you. If the current de facto fragmentation is somehow or will somehow be persistent in East, West, and the South, with no credible, respect to the outcome of the elections, that means building up a weak president that does not prevail all the, all across the Libya, then there's something problematic in terms of another escalation after the elections. Thank you so much. So I will start the second tour just to take your short assessments. So I would like to start again with His Excellency Mahmoud Alftise, because you are the one, sir, directly following the incidents over there. And I would like to just ask one thing. What are your proposed courses of actions? What do you propose to prevent all this pessimism? Well, delaying election is one, issue that can be circulated, though. What should be the steps to be taken in brief words for you, please?
Okay, thank you, Professor, again. It's a very hard question, really. Things are really getting very complicated as long as we are approaching the 24th of December, which is, what happened is the United Nations, maybe also the ambassador of America, the American ambassador, he puts the 24th of December as a holy day, that Libya, if they pass this day, there will be no Libya. This is what he said always. So I think this is a very bad. We can, if we can break this idea that the 24th of December, 24th of March, 24th of June 2022, I think we need some time. We need some time in order to get things together. concerning really to have a very robust law and also agreement, at least not there will be no 100% agreement, at least 80%, 70% agreement of the outcome. But now we have no agreements. We have problems between the three factions, as one of the speakers said, the Haftar faction and now Saif's faction and probably Dbeiba or the West. Even the West is not only one. We have Bashaga, we have Dbeiba, we have Mr. X and Y. So I think we have to we have to the international community, because now the main thing is Libyans are not free to act, unfortunately, because there are some big interferences from the United Nations, from United States, from probably Europe. Russia has a big role now. I mean, we cannot omit Russia. Russia, they have their man in the they are supporting Saif al-Islam to be in the coming election. Turkey have a role, and I hear today Mr. Brian Cullen in the opening statements. It was very good statements, and it was now Turkey position, not because we are talking now to SETA, but Turkey position is a very fair position. They are okay. They are asking to have election. Election is very important for us. Because we need the legitimacy government, and also we can even. But the thing is, others are imposing. I mean, they don't care. Some of the international community, they want to see somebody legitimate dictatorship, a fascist, Nazist. They don't care about this. They just want to see a man they want to deal with in their interest. But they don't care about democracy in Libya. They don't care about the future of the freedom in Libya. So I think we have to be very accurate that we must not see 24th of December as a deadline date. We have to think to break down this. If we can do this, I think if we can even do 24th of December 2022, maybe we'll have time to agree on something. But anyway, we need a roadmap. The roadmap must be produced by Libyans and approved by international community. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Okay, then Claudia, just under the cloud of this pessimism, what could be your specific roadmap as an Italian and EU citizen, and also representing ICG, because you have many different faces right now. You have a type of a footprint of Americans, Europeans. So what could be the roadmap? I mean, should we stick to December 24th? And we will. That's for sure. But what could be the further steps?
Thank you. I mean, several people here have mentioned the need for a technical delay, right? And the question is, for what purpose? What do we hope to achieve? Do we hope to achieve a consensus between the broader political, factions? In theory, this would be great. But personally, I don't think we'll ever achieve it, at least not in the formats of the UN dialogue processes that have been outlined and have been institutionalized. Remember, we are where we are now, and we're talking about the laws and the problems of the law because there was no consensus, and the UN failed to help forge a consensus when there was an opportunity, probably last July. So it dropped the ball on this. There's Draghi, there's my prime minister out there in Paris saying, we need to have a consensual law. I don't think that delaying the process in order to achieve a consensus is on the table at the moment. Okay, so what I'm saying is, let's delay the process in order to adjust what's there and make what's there more airtight and allow it to sort of be able to stand the test of time. I know it's not the best approach. The best approach is sort of what Anas is saying. Like, we don't have consensus. The country is going to be divided. We're going to go to war. So maybe we have to rethink this whole process. But a more pragmatic approach is to say, we are where we are because the UN and the UN envoy sort of gave the go-ahead to all these steps, gave the go-ahead to not pursuing a consensus in the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum. It gave the go-ahead to this law. The internationals didn't really object because the UN was guiding this process, right? So we are where we are, and what can we do to mitigate the risks? This is what I'm saying. So for the mitigation of the risks, and if this is the objective, and personally this is my objective now, I say what we do need is a technical review of the law for it to stand the test of time, to stand the test of judicial disputes later. We need to be, we need to have a sort of mediation between the candidates to respect the rules of the game, and we need to try to at least resolve these technical issues, because the alternative that somebody mentioned, and the dilemma that international stakeholders face now is, well, if we say the conditions are not right for elections and the whole process is postponed indefinitely, then we're going to have new problems. We're going to have the parliament that's going to nominate a new government. We're going to have rival, contested claims of legitimacy because of this. So I think let's try to at least mitigate the risks of what is currently on the table, rather than try to pursue an ideal approach, which is not within grasp immediately.
Okay, thank you. So, Anas, what could be your roadmap then? Because I'm receiving some questions, but just to be prepared, we have to, just work our imagination in terms of achieving what specifically.
Well, I certainly think that the threshold, or my measure for what should be done, shouldn't be counted in time or numbers. It's not about saying, let's do it next week or next month or 6 minutes later, or let's just do it because we have no other options. I think the question that I certainly want to focus on are trying to establish structures that will try, in a sense, move this country away from the polarization that has taken place over the last several months, several years. Your clock can start ticking whenever you want. My main focus, as I said, is really trying to establish structures so that we don't give the personalities on the ground, we don't give them too much emphasis. We don't give them the ability to essentially reward them for spoiling and reward them for bringing further antagonism or conflict. And otherwise, as Claudia has mentioned, the UN Political Dialogue Forum, which failed to bridge consensus, there should be a plan B. I mean, I think the UN has dropped the ball, essentially. And I think the UN needs to really outline a roadmap where these structures are impervious, whether it be, as I said, the legal fine-tuning of this law is only one, it's the crest of the wave. It's not the actual, it's not the density that's gonna hit the Libyans, 4 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. As I said, the main question for me is, if we have structures like a constitution that establish those rules of the game, if we have a law that establishes the rules of the game, if we have, and I think this is where we need to be able to emphasize why the constitutional chamber of the Supreme Court needs to take a decision now, not later, as Claudia has said. Because if it comes later, after the fact, then we're just reversing what we saw over the last several years. I think it's really important that there is a consensus before the elections. Now, if that checklist is going to come up, as I said earlier on, I think that we need to work on the sequence that Berlin put us on course for 2 years ago. That sequence should not put state building after elections. And I think it's not a question of time to suit the candidates. I'm sure the candidates today are desperate for elections. I'm sure the LNA, for example, today is desperate for electoral legitimacy. I mean, an overemphasis on trying to appease those that have brought war over the last 2 years and reward them with candidacy or being able to vet elections, I don't think that's a wise move forward. And I know it's still coming at a very last minute, but I still believe that what we can do now with a delay is better than moving forward, giving birth to a new crisis that is not going to go away, despite how many tweets we see from international actors or from the UN that says respect the results, respect the results. The entire process was disrespected by the candidates. And I think that in itself is telling us that we need to have, again, some consensus on the structures. I'm not going to be able to outline precisely who does that, but I think the UN and a new UN envoy is certainly the person that looks most reasonable or most relevant to be the custodian of that process. The Americans, given that they are clearly in the behind the scenes moving a lot of the parts with these elections, need to give a program. And the sloganeering around 24th of December, as other speakers have mentioned, is not doing anyone any benefit. I think, whether we do this in a month or a year or 10, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm not looking at doing it with a timeline in mind. The real question is, what do you achieve within that time? If you can settle the differences and at the very least begin the process of unification between the rival military factions, then you have something better than nothing. And that's really important, that they need to be given a project. And if it goes back to what Ibrahim Kalin mentioned in the opening session, I think there's also there's a serious challenge that Turkey is going to face, because it has a program for how it wants to achieve SSR on the ground. And it is in direct conflict with the way that Russia, Egypt, and the UAE envisage SSR on the ground. Those actors don't envisage SSR. They see the LNA as the custodian of the next state. It has a political role and it has a military role. And I think Turkey has a conflicting vision, and that's going to be settled whether through elections or after the elections. But there's going to be some serious friction when that process begins again. But I think we have to begin with that, and I think that is the herd of elephants in the room, is that you do not have a subservient military in Libya. You don't have subservient rival factions even. And I think if they're left to their own decisions, they will react to the political lightning rod that will take place after the 24th of December. So I'll reiterate in a final sentence: it doesn't matter. Don't count the time between elections in numbers, or by watching on your watch, on your hand wrist, right? The real question now is looking at what is achieved in that time. A constitutional basis is going to be key, because you can't have a president without a leash in a country, like I've said, with an authoritarian tradition. The second is that you need to have an answer for these rival military factions, and the Berlin process is the place to start. Neglecting it, ignoring it is not the solution here. And finally, we need a custodian again. The UN has dropped the ball, but the UN is still should be the only actor, if not the US is the only other actor, that has the ability to bring those rival factions together, but not to appease them and in their personalities, but to bring around a structure that is impervious. And I think that structure for me is still the constitutional basis. It's still unifying or beginning the unification of the rival military factions. Because if there is going to be a conflict, then you need to immunize Libya from the kind of sheer ferociousness that will emerge as a result of these elections.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Ousama Assed, there's a question directly submitted to you, and I would like to read it directly. What is the right and appropriate path to reintegrate the country that is de facto fragmented? Are the elections impediment to the unification and democratic transition of Libya? So the question is, again, a bit pessimistic. So it accepts the current fragmentation and asks for the course how to unite it in a proper way in accordance with democratic process, and asks specifically if election itself is a challenge to the unity of elections. A very tough question, I know.
Yeah, it's a very tough question, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it is a very tough question. I don't think I have the answer. I hope someone will have the answer for this kind of question. But I think maybe I would say the solution, but the way to bring the country together is there. It's in Libya. It's in the Libyan people. They have the inertia. But the problem is that we wasted 10 years not trying to find the strength that the Libyan people have. And it's a long process. It's longer than elections. It's longer than anything. It's a wasted time. But just to come back to what you were saying, the question is that for example, the country needs at least a constitutional framework that takes into consideration the regional and the geographical realities of Libya. And in the LPDF and the sequence that it was announced a constitutional framework, then elections. And what is surprising to me is that everyone was putting pressure on the elections and the election date, and no one was putting pressure on the constitutional framework. And I don't think there has been any work done on that. And I think if we have the right constitutional framework that would take into consideration the realities in Libya, it will appease tensions and it will make all regions feel that they are included in the Libyan process and that they can achieve their aspirations. I think that's one thing that should be done. So if we say about the technical delay of elections, so as Claudia mentioned, have the elections, the presidential and the parliamentary election at the same time, in February, I don't know. It would give us time at least to have a kind of a constitutional framework that would appease tensions and would make people feel. What is in Libya is fear. All Libyans have a fear of the authority, have fear of the future, because they don't see anything that consoles them and makes them comfortable. I think that's one of the things that maybe we need. The other thing I think that Libya needs is, I won't say a national dialogue, but at least it needs someone who, a Libyan part, not only an international part, a Libyan part that can talk to all Libyans and can discuss anything with Libya. We have to do this exercise to look for a symbolic figure in Libya. And we didn't do this exercise. We have to think for someone who has not been involved in the conflict, someone who has not been involved in corruption, someone who could not be accused of any of these atrocities. And I think it exists in the Libya. And I think it should be an exercise done by the internationals and by the Libyans. I'm not saying that he should be the president of Libya, but someone who the Libyans would listen to. These steps might help appease tensions. If people in the south support Saif al-Islam, it's not because they like him, because they feel that they were left by Tripoli, they were neglected by Benghazi. If people in the east support Haftar because they have some grievances against what was done in Tripoli, because their grievances were not dealt with, they were not considered by the local government. And if people in western Tripoli, seek protection from local militias, it's because there's no government. And I think the other thing that the international is that the actual government, for the time that it has until the elections are held, should have a real action plan, not a populist program, but a real action plan that will make people feel that there's a future and things can be done. What the government is doing now is buying people. That's not the solution. That doesn't console. So probably if we can concentrate on these two things, that might appease tensions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Claudia, there's another question directly relevant to you. I will read it. It's not that much tough, by the way. The question first asks why France initiated a new meeting a month ago if Berlin process is concerned, and is the French president's initiative alternative to the Berlin process, and what will be the future of Berlin process after the elections? And I would like to add one thing. This question is delving, the French attitude. But I want to ask another thing. What about the French-Italian cooperation agreement and its reflections on Libya? Because I see that they will have a coordinated approach to Libya. This is what I understand from the statement.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I think France organized that Paris summit a few weeks ago to give a strong push in support of elections. Why Paris? Well, they've been the ones that have been, calling for presidential and parliamentary elections in Libya since the summer of 2017, if I'm not mistaken. They were remember at the time they tried to convene Sarraj and Haftar and have them sign on an agreement. And they are the most enthusiastic supporters of this law adopted by the parliament, whereas other countries sort of expressed privately, I should add, their reservations about the procedures and the substance. France was always cheering on this law as an incredible sort of victory and a huge step forward. So it's in line with their sort of diplomatic approach to want to ensure that there is unanimous sort of international support for this position. And why Paris and not Berlin? Well, Germany itself is in a moment of transition. We're no longer looking at a Berlin with Merkel that, prioritized the Libya file, that called all the parties together to meet in Berlin to resolve the Libya conflict. So I think that, the new chancellor needs some time to fill his sort of boots and take on the Libya file as Merkel did. So probably this is why we're not seeing Berlin in a leading position on this. Italy, France, I mean, yes, they signed an agreement. Sincerely, I mean, I know as much as you just from the headlines of the agreement. I have no particular insight. I think the two countries still have a different view of where things stand in Libya. And we've seen that sort of emerge on their respective positions about this electoral law, for example. Draghi was not shy in Paris to say we need an election law, as if which implies that he does not take France's same position on this. So yes, they're working closer together, the two countries, but I don't think that this means that we're going to have a completely homogeneous position on Libya amongst the two capitals.
Thank you. And final question goes to His Excellency Alftise. Actually, we have neglected Egypt, and Egypt is really important to, proceed in the election or democratic process. There were meetings in Cairo, and as you know, President Sisi accepted Saleh and Haftar last month. Egyptian chief of intelligence is heavily engaging to Haftar still. So what could be the role of Egypt in Libya for a smooth process? Because they are the one in many others who can, push Haftar, comply with the requirements of, elections and democratic process.
It's a very hard question. Egypt is, we consider Egypt is not, they are sided with Haftar since the start of 2014. They supported him with all means. And they still supporting him because they would like to see military rule in Libya. They don't, because Egypt is, they overthrow the democratic president, and now they are controlled by military, by Mr. Sisi, and I think President Sisi will not give up Haftar because I think he is playing the role of that he would like to see the eastern of Libya almost belongs to the Egyptian role, because of, I don't know, maybe they say the national security of Egypt and etc. I think Egypt is still playing a role of sided, not exactly, or negative intervention in Libya, not positive, because Mr. Dbeiba tried to improve the relation with Egypt by visiting Egypt, and also some Prime Minister of Egypt comes to Libya and make some, they signed MOUs here and there. But I think they still, because Mr. Aguila Saleh and his group always get help from the Egyptian intelligence in order to draw their roadmap in order to control Libya, because I think if not Haftar, Aguila Saleh is also a close friend of Egypt. I don't think I don't see Egypt is playing a positive role in Libya. If they really intended to play a positive role, things will be also much better than what we are now. So I think we hope that Egyptians understand that their interest not only in persons, because maybe Mr. Haftar today is here and maybe after tomorrow is not here. But if they can make a good relation with the Libyan people, I think things will be much better than what we are seeing now. Big support to Haftar from Egypt still, even in the election and the coming election. Everybody knows this in the whole Libya. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would like to thank you all. It has been a long panel, I know, but the problem is a bit tough and should be resolved, addressed, and we should have projections for the coming period, for the sake of Libyan public, by the way. So I would like to thank your contributions to the audience, to our knowledge base, and I would like to say thank you for the audience, for their patience. So I will conclude the panel, and I would like to say bye.